American submariners never expected to find ancient ruins beneath Pacific trenches. They went to hunt enemy ships, not legends. It is 1943, night. The Pacific is black glass. A U.S. submarine drifts above a trench so deep, sound itself seems swallowed. The sonar man hears a pattern that shouldn't exist. Perfectly spaced echoes like stone pillars in the dark. Moments later, a camera nicknamed the Crab drops into the abyss. It returns with 3 frames. A right angle in the silt, a carved groove, a shape that looks like a stair. During World War II, 52 American subs were lost. Many vanished near these same fault lines. Coincidence? Or a hidden world no one was meant to see? A single log entry hints at coordinates the Navy later sealed. A young radio man writes one line he shouldn't. We found buildings where no sunlight has ever lived. The boat surfaces to silence, and men are warned to forget. But rumors don't drown. They travel. They multiply, and now, we open the hatch on a mystery the ocean tried to lock away. What did those wartime crews really see under the Pacific, in the hour between battle and oblivion? And why did some never come back? The stairway that shouldn't exist. The boat is the USS Grey Wolf, a long steel lung breathing in whispers. It moves slow, stalking, the way predators move when they own the night. The year is 1943. The water is warm, but inside the hull the air carries the chill of nerves. 24 hours have passed since their last periscope shot. Torpedoes spent. Orders say hold position, listen, wait. Outside, the Pacific swallows starlight whole. Inside, a red lamp paints every face with a sleepless glow. Forward, the sonar man leans close to his set. He is young, and he hides a note card under his sleeve, a piece of paper covered in neat pencil marks. He knows the language of the sea. Whales sing, propellers drum, storm swells groan. Tonight, he hears none of it. Tonight, the ocean answers in clicks. Not random. Not natural. Click, pause. Click, pause. Each return spaced like footsteps on stone. He calls the officer of the deck. The officer listens. He hears it too. A rhythm that makes the hair lift at the nape. The captain arrives, quiet as a shadow. His eyes take the room. The sonar man explains. He traces the pattern in the air with a finger, the way a teacher might trace a letter on the chalkboard. The captain gives a nod. He orders a slow drift over the trench. Engines barely turn. Silence spreads like ink. At the bow, a small winch begins to rattle. Men lower the Crab, a camera rig meant for shallow reconnaissance, not this depth, not this risk. But the captain is a curious man. War makes some men cautious and some men brave. It makes a few both. He needs to know what sings beneath him. The first length of cable slips from the drum. The boat tilts. The sea presses its weight against the hull, a steady hand on a beating heart. In the control room, the XO watches the depth gauge and the battery meter. They are numbers that decide who sees sunrise. The captain watches the men. He sees the way they look away from the hatch that leads down to the torpedo room, the way they do not want to think about steel or pressure or last breaths. The camera drops. The trench opens. The boat drifts across a mouth in the earth. The radio man logs the hour. He writes it clean. He has learned that logs are read like prayers. Each word must be careful. He does not write what he thinks he hears. He does not write what he just now thinks he feels. A thin hum along the deck, a tremble like distant machinery. He writes the hour and keeps the rest inside his chest. The sonar man speaks again. The clicks grow stronger. The spacing does not change. It never changes. In nature, even a chorus has variance. Whales breathe. Lava moves. Storms improve and decay. But this holds like a metronome in a room where no human has ever clapped. 30 minutes pass. The cable shudders. The winch squeals. The camera strikes something below. Not soft mud. Not a drifting rope. It thumps. A clean, sharp thump. Like wood against a stone step, the signalman flinches. The captain's jaw tightens. He orders them to hold steady. The boat obeys like a well-trained animal. Another thump. Then the cable slackens, then tightens, then slackens again as if the camera is touching edges, as if it is stepping down. 1, 2, 3. No one speaks the word stairs, but the word is in the room. Heavy, ridiculous, unwelcome. The word stands there, dripping. When the camera finally comes back, the film is 3 frames short of a miracle. The first frame shows silt, pale and soft, rasped into tiny ripples by current. At the upper right corner, a hard line cuts the softness, a 90-degree shoulder. Natural rock can make such corners, but seldom two, seldom three, seldom repeated. The second frame shows a groove, straight, narrow, smooth. The third frame catches a horizon of nothing, and on that horizon a small, rising edge. If a child drew a stair on a fogged window, it would look like that. The captain studies the frames. The XO breathes through his teeth. The sonar man wants to cheer and wants to pray and cannot do either. The radio man feels his hand move on its own. He writes a line he will later tear from the page. We found buildings where no sunlight has ever lived. The captain rips that line out first. The men replace the camera. They replace the cable. They replace calm with a kind of focused fear. The captain orders a sweep. If there is structure below, the current will tell him where it stands. Water wraps around walls. It whispers if you listen long enough. They listen. The trench hums like a hive. Not loud, not constant. A pulse, a breath. The sonar returns grow muddled, then clear, then empty. The boat drifts across a rectangular void. No echoes within. The sea disappears for a heartbeat. It is as if they glide over a chamber of air, sealed for thousands of years, bones of a hall beneath a roof of pressure. Impossible, beautiful, terrifying. They mark the coordinates. The captain folds the paper into his breast pocket. He orders full quiet. No transmissions. No lanterns, no talk. The sea carries sound and men carry rumors. Tonight, both are enemies. Hours later, a squall forces them to surface. Rain hits the hull like thrown rice. Wind claws at the periscope shears. The captain stares into a wet black world and imagines stairways rising from ooze, imagined hands building them, imagined worship in a place no dawn could reach. He imagines a temple in the dark and he hates himself for the word. By morning, they are gone from the trench. Orders push them toward enemy shipping lanes. Duty pulls them away from the echo of stone. War does not pause for mysteries. War never has. Still, the boat is different now. A crew is a single animal. It learns from what every pair of eyes has seen. It carries the weight of a secret like extra ballast. They trim the tanks and their hearts and carry on. 2 days later, their first torpedo misses, then detonates late, then throws a white hill of water into the air. The second runs true. A small freighter breaks its spine and surrenders to the deep. Through the periscope, the captain watches the stern lift and the propellers turn in the sky like teeth. He hears cheering in the compartment behind him and thinks, unfairly, of carved steps. The sea swallows everything, he thinks. War stories, stone stories, men. After the attack, a destroyer hunts them, patient and skilled. Depth charges fall like metal hail. The gray wolf goes blind. Lights out. Men count under their breath. 1, 2, 3. The first pattern lands wide. The second lands close enough to brush dust from the rafters. The third throws a man from his bunk and cracks a gauge. Somewhere aft, a wrench rings against a pipe, and the sound offers itself to the hungry ears above. In this thunder, the seam between courage and superstition tears open. The sonar man thinks of the hum below the trench. The radio man thinks of the line he tore from the log. The captain thinks of the folded coordinates over his heart. Men make promises in noise. If we live, I will never return there. If we live, I will, they live. The destroyer gives up. Silence returns as if ashamed of the show it put on. In the quiet, the captain makes his choice. After nightfall, after a long arc that fools any listening ear, he points the boat back toward the trench. He will give it 1 more hour. He does not tell the crew. He tells the ocean. They arrive under a moon that has learned how to hide behind cloud. The sea is a dark bruise. The captain orders the engines to the lowest whisper. He orders the camera prepared but not lowered. First he wants sound. He wants the click march. He wants the void inside the echo. He wants the breath of the hive. At first there is nothing. The sea is dull, cold, indifferent. The sonar man leans closer to his set, the way a child leans closer to a keyhole. He hears his own blood. He hears the clock. He hears a strange, slow beat he cannot place. The clicks arrive. 1. Pause. 1. Pause. 1. Not a thing moving through the water, but something the water must move around. He sketches the spacing in his head. He counts. He could hum this pattern in his sleep. The silent coordinates. The rain had turned the harbor into a mirror, rippling with each footstep. Captain Harland of the Grey Wolf stood beneath the corrugated roof of a naval outpost, the sea behind him whispering like a restless witness. He had just signed his last patrol report. The ink was still wet, but the story it hid had already begun to sink into silence. He told himself it was over. that the trench and the stair and the hum were all staying down there where they belonged. Yet every time thunder rolled across the sky, it sounded like the depth charges that night, the ones that didn't kill them but might have awakened something else. A week passed. Then one evening, a brown envelope arrived at his quarters, sealed with no name, no mark. Inside was a single slip of paper, coordinates, the same numbers he had burned months ago. Below them, in faint typewriter ink, 4 words: "You were not alone." He stared at that message for a long time. Then he folded it, tucked it into his jacket, and walked down toward the water. At the end of the pier, a sailor was smoking under a broken lamp. Harland recognized him, the sonar man, Keenan. The kid saluted awkwardly, then froze when he saw the captain's face. "You got it too, sir," Keenan said quietly. Harland's pulse slowed. "Two?" Keenan nodded. "Half the crew. Little slips like this. Some left in bunks, some slipped into pockets. Always the same coordinates." The captain's eyes drifted to the sea. The reflection of the broken lamp trembled on the waves like a heartbeat. "Who sent them?" he asked. Keenan swallowed. "No one knows. But a few men, they're talking about going back." That night, Harland dreamed again of the trench. The stair, the face, the low hum like 1,000 distant drums. When he woke, his pillow was damp with sweat. He didn't sleep again. Days later, he was summoned to Naval Intelligence. The building was gray, its windows blacked out with painted glass. Inside, 2 officers sat behind a table, one in uniform, one not. "Captain Harland," the man in uniform began, "you are aware of the sensitivity of operations conducted during wartime. Some discoveries, though unintentional, must remain sealed. For security." Harland's jaw clenched. "You mean forgotten?" The civilian leaned forward. "Forgotten. Or misremembered. Whatever history requires." He slid a file across the table. Inside were photographs, the Grey Wolf's camera frames, but they looked different. The clean angles, the faint face gone, retouched, blurred into shapeless rock. The evidence had been rewritten. "Why alter them?" Harland asked. The man's smile was slow, practiced. "Because, Captain, sometimes the truth sinks for a reason." Harland left the building with the file still open in his hand. As he reached the end of the corridor, the civilian called after him. "We advise you not to pursue this matter further. For your own sake." Outside, the sun was too bright. He folded the photos once, then again, until they disappeared into his fist. Weeks later, Keenan found him in a dockside bar. The young sailor looked older, shadows under his eyes like bruises. He slid a notebook across the table. Inside, sketched sonar patterns, hand-drawn waveforms, numbers, notes. "They're not random, sir," Keenan said, voice low. "The clicks we heard down there. I ran them through a friend's signal reader at the university. They're repeating sequences, patterns of 4, 5, 3. It's not geological, it's constructed." "Constructed?" Harland said. "Like code. Or language." Harland stared at the drawings. He wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in his throat. Keenan leaned closer. "Sir, the Navy's sending survey teams near the trench again. Not to fight, to dig. Whatever's down there, they're not ignoring it. They're claiming it." Before Harland could answer, the bar's radio crackled to life. A newscaster's voice cut through the smoke. "U.S. submarine lost in the Western Pacific. No distress call. No survivors reported." Keenan froze. "That's near—" "I know," Harland said. He rose, tossed a few coins on the table, and walked out. 3 days later, he stood on a weathered dock beside a rusting fishing trawler. Keenan and 2 others from the Grey Wolf were waiting. No uniforms now. Just faces set like stone. "You sure about this?" Keenan asked. "No," Harland said. "But if we don't go, someone else will. And they won't come back." The trawler's engine coughed to life. The harbor fell behind them, swallowed by fog. As they moved farther into the Pacific, the world seemed to flatten, sky and sea merging into one endless gray. By the second night, even the gulls were gone. Only the deep remained. They reached the coordinates by dawn. The water was unnaturally still. Keenan lowered a sonar buoy. The first pings came back normal. Then faintly came that sound again. Click, pause, click. The pattern hadn't changed. Harland closed his eyes. "Drop the camera." The rig sank slowly. Each foot of cable slipped like a whisper. Then the first image came through, a dark ridge. Then another. And then suddenly light flickered across the lens. Shapes loomed, angles, columns. Are those... Keenan began, but the screen flashed white. The camera feed dissolved into static. The boat lurched. Every compass spun. The sea around them began to churn in slow spirals. "It's the trench current," someone shouted. But Harlan knew it wasn't. The movement wasn't from the surface. It was rising. A roar filled the air, deep and vibrating, like 1,000 voices layered into one impossible note. The radio went dead. Then, silence. When the static cleared, the screen showed a cavern. Not silt, not ruin. An archway, massive, carved with symbols that shimmered like wet glass. No one spoke. No one breathed. The feed blinked once. Twice, then cut to black. Harlan leaned over the console, staring at his reflection in the dead screen. "Pull it up," he whispered. But the winch didn't move. The motor had stopped. The air on deck felt charged, heavy, alive. Keenan backed away, his eyes on the horizon. "Sir? Look." The water directly ahead was rising, not in a wave, but as if the sea itself were being lifted from below. A low circular swell. At its center, a dark mouth opened, perfectly round, rimmed with light that wasn't light. The trawler pitched. The deck tilted. A scream cut through the wind, swallowed instantly by the sound of rushing water. Harlan grabbed the rail. His mind flashed with the same thought that had haunted him since that first night. The sea has rooms. And maybe now one of them was opening. When he woke, he was lying on the deck, soaked to the bone. The storm had passed. The sea was calm again, eerily calm. The others were gone. Only the horizon watched him. He crawled to the console. The radio light blinked weakly. A faint transmission played, Keenan's voice, distant, crackling, almost unrecognizable. "Captain, it's hollow down here. There's light. Something's moving," then nothing. The coordinates flickered once on the radio display, then faded into static. Harlan sat back, staring into the gray emptiness around him. The trench had taken his crew, his answers, and perhaps the world's oldest secret. But the hum was still there, faint below the hull, steady as breath. The sea, it seemed, wasn't finished speaking yet, and neither was he. He turned the boat toward the horizon. The compass still refused to settle. The depth gauge trembled, confused. He smiled, not out of madness, but certainty. Somewhere beneath that silence, something was waiting. He gripped the wheel and whispered to the waves, "If you're listening." "I'm coming back." The wind shifted, carrying with it a low, distant sound. Click, pause, click. The same rhythm, the same call, the same promise that the ocean never forgets. Echoes from other boats. It was 2 years after the war, when the sea returned what it wanted to return. A storm off the Marianas tossed a half-rotted lifeboat onto a Filipino shore. Inside it lay a rusted toolbox, sealed tight with salt and time. The fisherman who found it pried it open for scrap. What he discovered instead were 2 rolls of film, brittle and brown, wrapped in oilcloth. One roll was blank. The other showed frames that no one could explain, stone steps, smooth as glass, sinking into darkness. The Navy took the find quietly. It was never seen again. Across the ocean, in a small coastal town in Oregon, Captain Harlan had learned to live with silence. The sea was far now, but its echo never left him. Each night he heard that faint clicking in his sleep. It would start soft, like a metronome in a dream, then grow louder until he'd wake in sweat, the sound still inside his skull. He'd taken a job in a shipyard, routine, safe, far from trenches and secrets. Or so he thought. One evening, a letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a photograph. Grainy, dark, water-stained. But the image was unmistakable. The same steps he had seen through the Grey Wolf's lens. On the back, in neat pencil, were 6 words. "It's opening again. North of Guam." That night, Harlan packed his duffel. He arrived in Guam 3 days later under a false name. The port was thick with heat and the smell of diesel. Sailors drank loudly at the dockside bars, pretending the war's ghosts didn't still walk among them. In the corner of one of those bars, a man waited. Thin, weathered, with eyes that remembered too much. "Keenan?" Harlan asked. The younger man nodded, though he didn't look young anymore. "I didn't think you'd come. Why did you call me back?" Keenan slid a small recorder across the table. "Because someone else went down there." He pressed play. The tape hissed, then came a faint voice, British, nervous. "This is the HMS Vortex, exploratory dive, depth 5,000 meters. Sonar reading consistent with geometric formations. We're descending now. The voice broke into static, then returned, faint, breathless. There's light down here. Artificial. Walls, carvings. They move! Then silence. Harlan sat back, the blood draining from his face. When was this recorded? 2 weeks ago, Keenan said. The ship never resurfaced. The bar's noise faded into a blur. Harlan stared at the recorder, then out the window to where the sea shimmered like molten glass. Who else knows? Keenan's eyes flicked toward the doorway. Enough to keep it quiet. They spent the next day aboard a borrowed research vessel. The name painted across its hull was Orion's Wake, though it was clear from its patched panels and mismatched radar that it had seen better days. Keenan's team was small, 3 men and 1 woman, a marine geologist named Dr. Rhea Lang who spoke little and watched much. As they moved farther from shore, the water grew darker, thicker. By nightfall, they reached the coordinates again. The ocean's surface was mirror flat, but the instruments told a different story. Pressure fluctuations, magnetic interference, a slow pulse that came from below. Rhea looked up from her gauges. There's movement under the trench floor. Something's alive down there. Or something's breathing. Harlan's hand tightened on the railing. Drop the probe. The winch moaned as the cable uncoiled. The sonar display flickered, lines bending, looping, then freezing altogether. For a full minute, there was nothing. Then a shape began to emerge on the screen. Not random. Not natural. Rectangular outlines forming a pattern like a city map. Streets, halls, towers. Keenan whispered, "It's bigger than last time." Rhea's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The seabed can't just shift like that." Harlan's voice was low. "Unless it's not shifting. Unless it's rising." A tremor ran through the hull. The coffee cups on the console rattled. Then, through the hydrophone, the sound came again. Click. Pause. Click. But this time it was faster, urgent, like something knocking from below. Rhea turned the dial. The clicks grew louder. They weren't echoes anymore, they were responses. Harlan leaned closer to the mic. "If you can hear me," his voice caught. "What are you?" The reply came as a deep, resonant tone that made every bolt in the hull shiver. The lights flickered and the engine stuttered. Keenan swore under his breath. "We're losing power." Then through the porthole, light. Not from the sky, but from beneath the sea. Columns of pale blue rising like fireflies trapped in glass. The entire trench below them glowed. Rhea stepped forward, transfixed. "My God, it's a city." Harlan's heart pounded. He saw the outlines again. The stairways, the arches, the enormous dome at the center. But something was wrong. The structures were not ruins anymore. They were whole, rebuilt, alive. And at the heart of it, something moved. It wasn't a creature, not in any way he could understand. It was a shape made of light and shadow expanding, contracting, as if studying them. Then the sound came again, no longer clicks, but a slow, rising hum. The sea began to spin. The compass needle danced in circles. Rhea shouted, "We need to get out, now!" But before they could cut the cable, the camera feed shifted. The light inside the trench turned red. The last image they saw froze them in place, carvings along the stair walls lighting up in sequence, each symbol pulsing like a heartbeat. At the end of the sequence, a single glyph flashed on the screen. Rhea's face drained of color. "That's Sumerian," she whispered. "It means return." Then everything went black. When the emergency lights came on, the camera feed was gone. The cable was gone. And the trench below was silent again. They drifted in stunned quiet. Keenan's hands shook on the wheel. "Did it just call to us?" Harlan looked out at the dark horizon. "No," he said slowly. "It called something else." That night, they anchored miles away, too shaken to sleep. Harlan stood alone on deck, the stars trembling above him. He pulled the old photograph from his pocket, the stone steps half buried in shadow. But now he realized something. There was more in the image than he'd noticed before. In the upper corner, faint and almost erased, was a silhouette of a man. Or something shaped like one. He looked closer. The figure wasn't standing on the steps. It was hovering just above them, as if the air itself held it up. His breath caught. He turned the photo over. On the back, beneath the fading pencil line, new words had appeared. Impossible, written in salt stains that hadn't been there before. "You opened the door. Don't look back." A sudden gust swept across the deck, tearing the photograph from his hand. He lunged for it, but the wind carried it away, down into the dark sea. Far below, the faintest flicker of light answered. The ocean was listening, and somewhere beneath that silence, something had awakened and remembered his name. The theories from the deep the sea had a way of erasing men, not with violence, but with patience and endless, deliberate swallowing. By the time word of the Orion's wake reached the mainland, the story was already losing its edges. Official reports called it an accident, a malfunction, a pressure collapse, a tragedy of routine. But Harlan knew better. He'd watched the light beneath the waves flare like a wound opening. He'd seen the carvings ignite. He had heard the word return. 2 weeks later, he found himself sitting in a sterile government room in Honolulu. The ceiling fan hummed like an interrogation light. Across from him sat a man he'd never met before, dressed in the plainest suit imaginable. He introduced himself simply as Cole. Cole asked about the mission, his tone calm, polite, even sympathetic. He didn't accuse. He didn't threaten. But every question was shaped like a blade. What exactly did you see below the surface, Captain? Describe the sound. Did you experience any hallucinations? Harlan answered carefully, but Cole's eyes said he already knew the truth, or part of it. When the interview ended, Cole stood, buttoned his jacket, and said one thing that made Harlan's pulse stumble. You should understand, Captain. That trench, it's not the first place we've seen them. Before Harlan could ask, the door opened, and Cole was gone. That night, Harlan couldn't sleep. The hum was back, faint but constant. It seemed to come from inside his bones. He left the hotel and walked down to the dark beach. The tide was low, the air warm, and the ocean glittered faintly under a half moon. As he stood there, he realized something strange. There were no waves breaking. The sea was holding its breath. He thought he saw a flicker of light far out beneath the surface. Just one, then another, like lanterns drifting below a black sheet. He waited, but they faded, swallowed by depth. When he turned back toward the road, a figure was standing there. A woman in a dark coat, her face hidden by the glow of a cigarette. Captain Harlan, she said softly. He froze. Do I know you? Not yet, but I know what you've seen. She introduced herself as Dr. Lyra Voss, ocean archaeologist. She said she'd been studying sonar anomalies across the Pacific, patterns too regular to be natural. Your trench isn't unique, she said. There are 6 others like it. Deep formations symmetrically aligned like points on a map. What kind of formations? Harlan asked. Temples, she said simply. Or cities, if you prefer that word. Her voice was calm, too calm. There's a theory, she continued, that during the last ice age, before the rise of known civilizations, there existed an oceanic culture, one that vanished when the waters rose. But the ruins we've found, if they are ruins, are far older than that. They predate humanity as we know it. Harlan felt the world tilt. Then who built them? She met his eyes. Maybe no one did. Maybe they were never built at all. Maybe they grew. The words stayed with him long after she left. Days passed, and he followed her to a research station on the edge of the Philippine Sea, a place so isolated it didn't appear on civilian charts. There he saw things that made his blood run cold. Glass cases holding coral-like stones that weren't coral at all, sharp, geometric, humming faintly when the lights went out. Maps with trench outlines forming a spiral too deliberate to be coincidence. Lyra showed him a recording from a deep-sea drone, footage recovered by a Japanese expedition 2 years earlier. The video was short, distorted, but unmistakable. It showed a dome structure, half buried in silt, covered in carvings identical to the ones Harlan had seen. Then, just before the feed cut, a shadow passed over the camera, blotting out the light. The size of it was beyond reason. We think the structures are alive, Lyra said quietly. Or at least reactive. They respond to sound. Vibration. Frequency. You mean sonar? Exactly. When you and your crew scanned the trench during the war, you might have awakened it. Harlan stared at her. You think we caused this? She shook her head. Not caused, invited. That word hit harder than it should have. Invited. As if something had been waiting for someone to knock. That night, a storm rolled in. The ocean around the station churned black, lightning flashing like veins across the horizon. Harlan couldn't sleep. He found Lyra in the control room, staring at a sonar display that flickered in the darkness. "It's moving again," she whispered. On the screen, the deep readings pulsed in slow, rhythmic bursts, the same sequence of clicks. But this time there was something new. Between the intervals, faint bursts of structured tone, almost musical. "It's communicating," Lyra said. "The pattern is recursive. It's responding to our instruments." As they listened, the building seemed to vibrate ever so slightly. A low resonance shuddered through the floor, rising through their feet, their chests, their teeth. Then the power cut. The emergency lights came on in a blood-red glow. Outside, the wind screamed and the sea thundered against the rocks. Harlan ran to the window. For a heartbeat, lightning illuminated the waves, and there, far out, he saw it, a shape rising from the trench. Immense, black against the flash, its surface patterned with glowing veins like molten stone. Then darkness again. He stumbled back, breath ragged. "It's here." Lyra's face had gone pale. "No," she whispered. "It's listening." A deep rumble echoed through the ground, not from thunder, but from below. The instruments lit up again, every gauge spiking. The hum grew louder, vibrating the glass in their windows until it cracked. Lyra clutched the console. If it breaches the surface, she never finished. The next flash of lightning lit the horizon, and for an instant the sea looked wrong. The waves had flattened. The storm's motion had stopped. Every drop of rain seemed suspended in air. Then, slowly, the ocean began to rise, not in chaos, but in formation. Rings of water curling upward, encircling something vast. Harlan shouted over the roar, "Shut down the transmitters!" Lyra hit the switches, but the lights stayed on. The machines weren't responding. The sound wasn't coming from the building anymore, it was coming through it. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The red lights flickered once, twice, then died. Silence. They stood in the dark, hearts pounding, ears ringing. Lyra's voice was a whisper. "Captain, listen." From far out over the water came a single low tone, drawn out and haunting. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't mechanical, it was a voice. Harlan felt it in his ribs more than he heard it. The sound was slow, deep, ancient. Like something too big to fit inside the world was trying to speak through the sea. Then, from the dark, came a second voice. This one smaller, closer, human. The radio crackled on its own, and Keenan's voice spilled through, warped by static. "Captain, it followed us down here. It's inside the walls." Then nothing. Harlan lunged for the radio, shouting into it, but the only reply was the soft clicking sound, the rhythm he knew too well. Click. Pause. Click. Lyra's trembling hand pointed at the sonar. The readings had changed. The shape beneath the trench wasn't stationary anymore. It was spreading outward, 6 arms branching in every direction, reaching toward the other marked coordinates she'd shown him. "It's not one structure," she said. "It's a network." He stared at the display, watching as each point began to pulse in perfect sequence. One after another. A chain reaction. The ocean outside began to glow faintly again, pale blue veins twisting beneath the surface. The hum deepened until the walls of the room quivered. Harlan gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. If that's a city waking up, what happens when all of them do? Lyra met his eyes. Maybe. That's what it's been waiting for. The final lightning flash illuminated the sea one last time, and at the horizon something immense broke the surface. Not a ship, not a creature, a structure. A pillar of black stone slick with light, rising higher and higher until the storm clouds wrapped around its crown. Symbols glowed across its sides like veins of fire. Then the world went white. When Harlan opened his eyes, there was no sound. No storm, no sea, only fog, and beneath it the faint echo of clicking fading into silence. The ocean had answered, but its answer had only just begun. Descent into the black cathedral. When Harlan woke, the world was gray. The sea was calm again, glass smooth, too calm for what had just happened. The research station was gone. Only smoke and twisted beams floated in the water around him. He was lying on a fragment of hull, clutching the radio that somehow still hissed faint static. The last thing he remembered was light, blinding, rising light, and a sound that tore the air apart. Now, only silence. And far beneath that silence, a hum. He drifted for hours before a freighter spotted him. They pulled him aboard, half dead, eyes sunburned and voice broken. When they asked what happened, he said only one word: trench. No one asked again. The captain of the freighter made a call before dawn. The next day, men in gray coats came for him. Weeks vanished into white rooms. Harland was kept under observation, or maybe surveillance. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. They said it was for his recovery, but the questions came back, slow and soft. The patterns, the sounds, the shapes in the deep. He gave them the same answer every time. I don't know. Until one night, someone left a note under his door. 3 words written in sharp pencil: "It's still rising." The next morning, he found out that the earthquake had struck. A massive undersea tremor in the Western Pacific, epicenter near the same coordinates he had marked years before. The news called it tectonic. Scientists spoke of shifting plates, but Harland knew better. Something had moved down there, something old. Something no one could stop. By evening, he was gone. He reached Manila by cargo ship under another name. The world above the ocean looked the same, but everything felt off. Compass needles spun wrong. Birds flew inland at dusk. Fishermen whispered of strange lights below the waves, blue, green, red, dancing like the breath of something alive. In the port tavern, he found Lyra, or what was left of her. She'd survived the explosion, but her right hand trembled constantly. When she looked up, her eyes were haunted. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. "I didn't," he answered. "It came back for me," she nodded, as if she'd expected that. Then she showed him the new data, satellite readings from the Pacific Ridge. Sonar echoes forming perfect concentric circles. A pulse repeating every 6 hours, synchronized across multiple trenches, like a heartbeat that now belonged to the ocean itself. "What does it mean?" he asked. She looked out the window where the moonlight broke on the water. "It means the city is no longer sleeping. And if it's breathing, then it's waiting for something." Harland didn't sleep that night. The hum was louder now. Not in the walls, not in the air, but in his head. It came in waves, matching his pulse. Sometimes it spoke in clicks, sometimes in tones. He began to recognize the pattern, the same rhythm that had haunted the gray wolf all those years ago. Click, pause, click. It was calling him back. By dawn, they had a plan. A deep-diving submersible, small, experimental, stolen from a military contractor who'd gone missing himself. Lyra's contacts had smuggled it into a forgotten bay north of Guam. They called it Mariana 1. Its hull was designed for the trench's pressure, but its mission was simple. One last descent. The morning they launched, the horizon burned red with sunrise. The sea was flat as oil. Harland climbed into the cockpit, sealing the hatch as Lyra checked the instruments. She hesitated before closing the final latch. "If we lose signal," she said, "we don't turn back. We go until we find it." The sub slipped beneath the surface, swallowed whole by blue. The descent was slow. The water grew darker with each 100 meters, colors fading until only dim green remained. At 3,000 meters, they passed through a thermal layer, a sudden chill that made the hull creak like old bone. Then at 4,800 meters, the sonar pinged. A wall below. Too smooth. Too symmetrical. The readings were identical to those from the Grey Wolf's last patrol. Lyra's breath fogged the glass. "We're here." They switched to cameras. The trench floor appeared first, rippling sand, slow currents, drifting debris. Then the shadows emerged. Angles, corners, pillars, the same impossible geometry. "It's grown," Harland whispered. At the center of the camera's view, the stairway rose once more, flawless and clear. The same one from the old photographs, but now the carvings glowed faintly, as if veins beneath stone were pulsing with light. "Recording," Lyra said, her voice trembling. The sub's lights flickered. The hum returned, this time deeper, vibrating through the hull. The instruments spiked. The cameras blurred. Then, on the screen, the impossible happened. Movement. The stone shifted. Slowly, gracefully, as if the entire structure were turning toward them, Lyra gasped. "It's aware of us." The lights outside intensified, forming a pattern, rings of symbols glowing one by one like an invitation. "Should we approach?" she asked. Harlan didn't answer. He pushed the throttle forward. The sub glided down the stair, weightless in the black. Each pulse of light drew them deeper into the structure. The stair ended at a gate, massive, circular, carved with spirals that seemed to move when looked at too long. At its center, a hollow opening shimmered with faint blue light, like water inside glass. Lyra whispered, "It's a portal, or an entrance." The hum intensified. The subsystems flickered between warning codes. Harlan's hands shook on the controls. "If it's calling us," he said, "we answer." He guided the sub forward. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything went silent. The pressure vanished. The instruments went dead. Outside the viewport, the world changed. They floated through a vast chamber, columns rising higher than sight, carved walls glimmering with liquid light. It was not stone. It was alive, breathing with slow, rhythmic pulses. At the center of the space, a sphere hovered, black as obsidian, smooth as oil, rotating slowly. The hum came from it, resonating in perfect waves. Lyra's hand hovered over the controls. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then the sphere stopped rotating. It faced them, or seemed to. Lines of light formed across its surface, a shape that wasn't quite a face but felt like one. And then it spoke, not in words, but in vibrations that shook the air inside the sub. The glass quivered. The sound burrowed into their chests. Lyra screamed. Harlan clutched his head as a flood of images filled his mind, oceans forming, cities sinking, light burning through waves. He saw the world before humans, before war, before memory. When the noise stopped, both of them were trembling. Lyra's eyes were wet. "It showed me." "The beginning," she said. "And the end." Harlan could barely speak. "It's not a ruin," he whispered. "It's a memory." The sphere began to sink. The chamber darkened. The hum deepened, becoming a rhythm like a heartbeat. The entire structure began to move, not collapsing, but folding inward, sealing itself. Lyra turned toward him. "It's closing." He reached for the controls, but the systems were unresponsive. The lights outside died one by one. Then, through the viewport, he saw the stair vanish beneath shifting. Layers of sand, as if time itself was reversing. Torberthurbiai. Last thing he heard was the clicking sound again. Click, pause, click, and a whisper that wasn't in his ears but in his mind. Return complete. The chamber imploded into light. Far above, on the surface of the Pacific, the sea bulged once, then settled into calm, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Days later, fishermen would report a new island, a ring of black stone barely breaking the surface, shaped like a spiral. They said it hummed when the wind blew through it. But no one ever found the sub, and deep below, the black cathedral slept once more, waiting for the next signal. And the next curious soul who would dare to listen.